Hello students, welcome to today's biology class. In our last class, we learned about tissues. We learned that tissues are a group of cells that have similar structure which act together to perform a specific function. We learned that plant tissues can be of two types, the meristematic tissue and the permanent tissue. The meristematic tissues are responsible for growth of plants. And depending on their position on a plant, we can call them the apical meristem, the lateral meristem, and the intercalary meristem. As I told you in the last class, that the cells which are born because of the mitosis process of the meristem cells are initially exactly like the meristem itself, but later on they differentiate to form the permanent tissues in plants. So in our today's class, we will learn about the plant tissues which are the permanent plant tissues. The permanent tissues in plants can be broadly categorized into two categories, simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissues. The simple permanent tissues can further be categorized into parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma, while the complex permanent tissues can be divided into xylem and phloem. Now, as the name suggests, you can guess that simple permanent tissues will only be made up of a single type of cell. So let's learn about the first type of simple permanent tissue, which is the parenchyma tissue. The parenchyma tissues are elongated in shape. These are living cells and their cell wall is made up of cellulose. They have a very thin cell wall. As you can see in the diagram, they consist of a large central vacuole. And since they are loosely packed, there is a lot of intercellular space in between them. The main role of these tissues is to provide support to the plant and also stores the food. There are some instances in which these parenchymatic tissues contains chlorophyll and performs the function of photosynthesis. In this case, they are called Sclerenchyma. In aquatic plants, they have large air cavities in them which provides buoyancy to the plants and help them float. Such parenchymatous tissues are called parenchyma. Now let's learn about the second type of simple permanent tissues, which is called the collenchyma. Collenchyma are also living tissues and are elongated in shape. Their cell wall is made up of cellulose and pectin. We learned that parenchyma cells are loosely packed and therefore they have a lot of intercellular space. This is not the case with collenchyma tissues. The collenchyma tissues have a very little intercellular space between them. The main function of collenchyma tissue is to allow easy bending in various parts of plant. So these types of tissues can be found in leaf stalks below the epidermis. The last type of simple permanent tissue is the sclerenchyma. Sclerenchyma are dead tissues. They are long, narrow cells and they do not have intercellular space between them. The cell wall in this case is made up of lignin. Their main function is to provide strength to plants. Where will they be found? They will be found around the vascular tissues in stems, the veins of the leaves, and the covering of seeds and nuts. So next time you see the husk of a coconut, remember it is due to the sclerenchyma tissue. Before we proceed to learn about the permanent tissues in plant, we have to learn about protective tissues. These tissues neither comes under the category of meristematic tissues nor under the category of complex permanent tissues. So it is a separate category of tissues which are required by the plant to provide them protection. And what are the two categories? The two categories are the epidermis and the cork. The epidermis is usually made up of a single layer of cells. But we know that there are some plants which live in very dry habitats, for example, cactus. In such categories, the epidermis may be a little thicker. because they require more protection against water loss. So where will the epidermis be found? The epidermis will be present in the entire surface of a plant and has the outer covering. Its main function is to protect the plants. Now, since the role of epidermis is protection, therefore, they form a continuous layer without any intercellular space. But if we carefully observe the epidermis of the leaf, we will note that in the lower portion of the epidermis, there are some pores. You must have learned about them in grade 7 and 8. What are these pores called? These pores are called stomata. We already know that these stomata are responsible for the exchange of gases from the atmosphere and for the process of transpiration. These stomatal pores are guarded by two kidney-shaped cells which are called guard cells. Now, since I told you that epidermis is the outer layer of all the parts of the plant, therefore it will also be present in the roots. Agree? So in the root, what is the function of root? The function of root is absorption of water. So in the epidermal tissues of the roots, the cells will bear long hair-like parts. And what will these long hairs do? That will increase the absorption capacity by increasing the surface area. In desert plants, the epidermis will be coated with waxy covering of cutin, which will further provide a coating to the plant and make it waterproof. The second type of protective tissue is the cork. Cork is the outermost layer in older roots, and we learned that the outermost layer in all the plant parts is made up of epidermal tissues. But as the plant matures, the epidermal tissues are replaced by the another type of tissues which are called cork. These are made up of dead cells and they do not have intercellular space between them. The cell walls of cork cells are made up of suberin. Because of this chemical suberin, they are impervious to the gases and water. Therefore, the exchange of gases and water in mature plant parts is regulated with the help of the suberin which is present in the cork tissues. Now, let us learn about complex permanent tissues. The complex tissues are made up of more than one type of cell, and all these cells coordinate to perform a common function. The two types are the xylem tissues and the phloem tissues. These both are conducting tissues and constitute a vascular bundle. The xylem tissue consists of tracheids, vessels, fibers, and parenchyma. The phloem tissue consists of sieve elements, companion cells, fibers, and parenchyma. We already know that xylem is responsible for transport of water and minerals. The tracheids and vessels are tubular structures. Therefore, it allows the transport of water and minerals vertically. The parenchyma stores food and helps in the sideways conduction of water. The function of fibers is mainly supportive in nature. If we look at the structure of phloem, we will see that the tubular cells in phloem tissues are sieve tubes. As you can see in the diagram, these sieve elements are perforated. We know that the flow of water and mineral is only unidirectional in xylem, but the phloem transport material in both the direction. The function of phloem is to transport food from leaves, parts of the plant. Except from phloem fiber, the other cells in a phloem tissue are living in nature. Now let us do a recap of difference between xylem and phloem tissues. Xylem tissues are mostly made up of dead cells, whereas phloem are mostly living cells. The cell wall thickness in xylem is comparatively more than phloem. The cell wall of xylem cells are made up of lignin, while that of phloem is made up of cellulose. Xylem tissues are impermeable in nature, but phloem tissues are permeable because of the perforations present on them. Since xylem vessels are mostly non-living, therefore the cytoplasm is absent. The main function of xylem is transport of water and minerals, whereas phloem transports food. Water is carried to leaves. Why? Because leaves are the site where the photosynthesis will take place, while the phloem carries food to the growing parts and the storage organs where the food will be stored for future use. As we already discussed, the xylem always moves water and minerals in the upward direction, only one direction, whereas the movement of food will happen both directions, that is up as well as down. Now, after watching the video, you have to complete the table which I have given you in the form of a class task, and for the evening task, you have to do the given worksheet. Yesterday, I gave you a task in which you have to make a flow chart of different types of plant tissue. Your flow chart could be something like this, or it could be a little different from this also. Everything is correct. Just keep in mind, when you go home today, below each category of the plant tissue, just write the key points which you have learned in today's class. That will help you to remember them better.